Okay, well, welcome to our rescheduled summer Eco Team meeting on July 8th, 2024. Thank you all for joining us. I will share my screen so that we can look at the slideshow that I have prepared. And thank you, Kira, for helping to contribute to that. And if at any point my screen stops looking correct, just let me know. That only happened once. Just some general housekeeping rules. Please keep yourself muted until you're ready to speak. You can consider using the raise hand function to let us know that you have a question you want to ask. You can also put it in the chat. We'll try to answer that as quickly as we can. Just be courteous and respectful. We've never had an issue with the Eco Team getting rowdy, but I like to say it just in case. Our agenda is pretty straightforward today. We're going to have a new Eco Team co-chair election, which will be the first time since 2021 that we've done this. So that's pretty exciting. We're looking forward to that. We're also going to take a look at the draft watershed plan, which is nearing completion. So that's going to be pretty exciting too. Then we've got some updates from the Bronx River. We've been collecting data. We've been doing some surveying and monitoring and just other things that we've noticed regarding the river's health. We'll take a look at those considerations as well. Also, some issues and concerns have been raised in the last few months, and I think it's important that we bring that to the Eco Team for some quick discussions and just for general awareness about what's happening on the river. And then, of course, we always like to bring some calls to action and opportunities for everybody to be an advocate for the Bronx River. And then we'll end with feedback and any questions that might come up. If there's recommendations for what we can do differently or things we can do to enhance the experience of our team members, that's always a great time to bring those suggestions is at the end of the meeting. Of course, if you have to leave the meeting early, you can always drop those things in the chat as well. And you can follow up with me via email after the meeting at any point in between meetings. Okay, so I'd like to do a quick round of introductions. I guess I'm going to stop sharing so we can look at each other really quickly. But really quick, for those who may not know me, my name is Christian Murphy. I am the Ecology Coordinator at the Bronx River Alliance. I oversee our community science programming, and I'm kind of a liaison between the Alliance and a couple of different coalitions who are all working towards clean and healthy waters in New York City and Lower Westchester. I'm going to pass it really quick to Kira to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kira. I'm Christian's new ecology assistant, helping out with all things ecology of the Bronx River. So that's a wide variety of things. But right now, we've been doing a lot of unified water study and enterococcus water quality monitoring, which we'll talk about later on. Excited to be at my first Eco Team meeting, and I guess I'll pass it to Danny.
Hi, Daniel Rennell, he, him. I'm Director of Programs and Operations here. I sit right over there from Christian. I will pass it to Nikki.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki. I've been volunteering with the Bronx River Alliance since last December. Nice to meet you all. And I'll pass that down to Juliet.
Hello, everybody. My name is Juliet. I'm sitting here actually more on behalf of my son, Constantine, who's working right now. We recently joined this organization. We've done work upstate with invasives. That's where we are right now, and water. And we've seen how the power of collecting data and reporting it can really influence funding. So we love this organization too. And we see also, like, even though we're at the moment in a small community, I feel like the Bronx River Alliance is also like a small community within the big city or sense of community. So we're really happy to be here. Did Rebecca speak?
Sure, I can go. Hi, I'm Rebecca Swadek. I work for the Parks Department. I'm the Director of Wetlands, and I'm one of the Ecology co-chairs. I can pass it to Martin.
Good afternoon. I'm Marty Ducat. I am a member of the board of the Bronx River Alliance and have been for a while. And one of my main reasons for being on the board and continuing to work with the Bronx River is to keep monitoring Christian's work and watch what's happening with the ecology on the river. I have to pass it to somebody. Nikki.
Nikki went. I will
I
pass
just
it
did.
She went?
to, yeah, how about we'll pass it to David and then Daisy.
Daisy, right.
I'll go first here. Hi everyone, my name is David Abreu. Longtime Bronx River Alliance volunteer and a Bronx resident, and professionally I work for Save the Sound as the clean water advocacy specialist there. A lot of my work centers around our Long Island Sound report card and working in designated environmental justice communities. So, you know, always glad to be involved with BRA. And yeah, I'll pass it on to Daisy.
Hi everyone, good evening. Daisy Nunez here. Pronouns are she, her. I'm here as a community member and a volunteer with the Bronx River Alliance. I love their work and what they stand for. And on a professional capacity, I work for the local congresswoman. So happy to be here and nice to meet you all. I think I'm the last one, right?
You are. Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves.
Siddhartha.
Siddhartha.
Sid raising his hand. Yeah.
Last but not least, I'm so sorry, Sid.
No worries. I'm not a usual attendee. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Siddhartha Sanchez, the new executive director here at the Bronx River Alliance. I'm really excited to join the call and see some familiar faces, meet some others. I have a background in government and philanthropy, and have been involved with the Alliance for about 20 years in different ways, from different places, and you know, always working in support of the grassroots in the South Bronx.
Great, thank you, Sid. And we're very thankful to have Siddhartha as our new executive director. It was a long process to get to this point. And I think I speak for the entire Alliance when I say that it is a great relief to have Sid with us. And thank you for joining the Eco Team meeting tonight. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. We may blaze through some of these slides in the interest of time, but that's okay. So why don't we get started with something that we have not done for a number of years now, and a position that I've been trying to fill for a little while. David is our candidate for the new co-chair, or one of our new co-chairs. This is something that we, I think, strive to do every 2 years or so. It's been a while, but it's great that we're in this process again. So David submitted this little blurb to me a little while ago. I'm happy to read it now. David is from the Bronx, where he has experienced the environmental injustices that have impacted so many communities around New York City. While he holds a degree in computer science and cybersecurity from Iona University, David wanted to pivot to a career in environmental science and justice to help push for the solutions and strategies that will prepare communities like his to deal with the effects of climate change. So David, as he mentioned, was a water quality volunteer with me at one point. He's also done project waste activities. So when we're looking at the garbage that we're moving from the river and trying to understand what those sources of litter are. So he's very well versed in a lot of the problems that the Bronx River has been dealing with, and is no stranger to our work. And so seemed like a great choice, a great fit for Eco Team co-chair. So David, I'm going to give you the floor for a few minutes. If you want to share a little bit more about why you'd be interested in being a co-chair and kind of what led you to this point.
Sure. Thank you, Christian. Yeah, I think, you know, like it says in that blurb, right? I've been a long time, you know, and still to this day, Bronx resident. I live probably 5-6 minutes away from the Bronx River. So I've had a very close connection with it over the past couple years, but it wasn't until I paddled the Bronx River for the first time that I really grew a fondness and appreciation for the natural beauty of the Bronx. And really, you know, you see firsthand the issues, but also the beauty, like I said. And so, those two things combined were really what inspired me to get into this line of work. Like it says here, pivoting from computer science and really looking for, something that I can pursue that would have an impact and benefit my community in a positive way. And so, one thing led to another, and through, volunteering with Bronx River Alliance, I was able to, gain enough experience and eventually come to work for Save the Sound, who, works very closely with the Alliance. And so I'm really ingrained in kind of this work, this water quality work, and it's really a passion of mine now. And so, yeah, just being able to combine that again with, being from the Bronx and seeing these injustices firsthand, it seemed like a perfect fit for me. And, the invite from Christian was nice as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. David, would you be able to share anything about what you learned from working at Save the Sound as it pertains to some of these topics at all?
Yeah, so a lot of our work is centered around water quality, right? Very similar to the volunteers that you have, Christian. We work, from New York City to Connecticut, and part of that work centers around the Bronx River specifically. And so I'm able to bring, that wealth of knowledge to the Alliance. Not that you're lacking in that respect at all. But just that other perspective as well as that local perspective, right? I'm a Bronx resident, like I've said, and like it says here. And so, living closely while also kind of working on a larger scale than what the Alliance is working on. It seems like a great pairing. And so being able to, bring that water quality skill set as well as kind of the local know-how. I think that's a bit of what I bring to the table here.
Awesome, thank you. So the co-chairs are supports for me, the chair of this team. I look to co-chairs for advice and wisdom when there are issues or sign-ons or things that come across my desk. I think it would be valuable for the Bronx River Alliance or for the Bronx River Eco Team to get involved. I reach out to the co-chairs and I ask them what they think, if they think it's appropriate for us to get involved, if it aligns with our mission and our work. If there are questions about the ecological health of the river or things near the river, I might reach out to the co-chairs to ask them what they think about those issues. If they think that they're not very serious, or if they are serious, then we need to look for solutions, if we need to reach out for other help and whatnot. And so they're very valuable resources to me, and have also helped to steer this team and the Alliance as a whole when it comes to the ecological restoration of the Bronx River over the years. So it's not a huge role, but it is an important role. It's one that I think is very valuable, and I really have a lot of respect for all of the co-chairs that I've had to work with, had the opportunity to work with, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully working with David if we elect him to the co-chair position. So with that being said, if anyone wants to make a comment now, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to open up a quick Zoom poll and see what we all think. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point? Hearing none, I'm going to launch the poll. Very straightforward. Should we elect David to be a co-chair? Yes or no? Give you all a few seconds. If there's any technical issues, please let me know. All right, I'm going to close the poll in 10 seconds. So speak now. All right. Poll is ended, and unsurprisingly, it is a landslide. Congratulations, David, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation to apply to be the co-chair.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, very happy to have you on the team.
Yeah, glad to be here. Can't wait to, get started.
Yeah. Becca, is there anything else you would like to share as a longtime co-chair? Any other aspects of the role?
I don't, one aspect I guess I can add is just one thing that we have done historically too is like a couple years ago, for example, there was a big fish kill on the Bronx River. And so kind of spreading the word and making sure folks are aware about that, but also kind of reviewing, we did this even recently for something for y'all, but reviewing kind of correspondence or communications that we're planning around those issues. And even, I mean, I can do this because of my role as well, but even, you know, kind of coordinating those with other governmental entities as well as, or NGOs as needed to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. But that's the gist I think that I'd add. But yeah, glad to be here. Glad to have you, David. It's been a lonely road on this side for a while after our last co-chair left his position. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. I realized I did not share the agenda document in the chat, and I apologize for that. I need to go and find that tab. And I found it. And I'm going to drop it in the chat, and I'm going to narrate all my actions. Okay, if you can access that, let me know or let Daniel know. But that is our agenda for today. I'll go back to sharing my screen. It's so nice and intimate today. I guess everybody's on vacation. Oh, watershed plan update. Okay, so this is something that we've been talking about for a very long time. This language is actually taken directly from the watershed plan itself. And essentially it is to update this guiding document, which was first published in 2010, which kind of leads our restoration work on the Bronx River. It seeks to find opportunities for any projects that can enhance the watershed. And so historically that was things like new habitat or creating the fish passage over the 182nd Street Dam, which connected the river to the ocean properly for the first time in 400 years, and things like that. But now in 2024, as we were talking earlier, it's, you know, the weather's getting weird. Things are getting, you know, kind of volatile in terms of climate. And that has profound impacts both on the river and on the communities that live along the river. And in recent years, more and more, what we're seeing is that people's quality of life along the Bronx River has been impacted, in some cases, quite substantially from climate change. And so what better opportunity than to update this plan with climate change as a focal point. And so we are doing that now. We're very close to the end of this process. This started in 2022 in the winter when we looked at consultants that would help us write this document. And then we went through a series of public input sessions with community members across the river from White Plains down to the Bronx to seek input on the concerns that people were raising, as well as where they saw that there might be opportunities for projects to, you know, protect the bank or open up access to the floodplain, or open up access to new recreational spaces as well. All of those things we were taking into consideration. And so now we're synthesizing all of those things and have produced this draft. And officially, feedback was due on Friday of last week. But if anyone wants to give feedback now, we will accept feedback for one final day, and then we'll be sending any other comments or suggestions to our consultants tomorrow. So if you're hearing this and you'd like to give feedback, you have, let's say, 16 hours to do so. But yeah, why don't we take a quick dive? I'm going to stop sharing my screen again and then show you some pages from the plan itself. I think it's a great document so far, and I also want to thank Becca for providing some really, really good feedback to our consultants. It's very clear to me that you sat down and read this document very intimately, and I thank you for that because I know that that must have taken a long
I
time.
tried.
Yeah, it shows. I want to show you. Boop, 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 boop. I wish I'd done a little bit more to be able to parse this, but why don't we start with watershed characterization? This is a draft that has comments on it. You can disregard this for now. But the first sort of interesting chunk of this document really dives into the physical being of the Bronx River watershed. So its length, its geology. There's a good discussion of the plant communities along here. And so it's looking at the native plant species, the invasive plant species. It also looks at what stretches of the river offer habitat for native fish, and where there could be potential to restore habitat that would increase, the likelihood of a fish population surviving and thriving. I think that this part of the document does a really good job of sort of bringing you into the watershed in an intimate way. There's a lot that I learned from the consultant, including that we have some stands of native forests along the Bronx River, or even secondary growth forests, that are quite unique. Particularly, I'm remembering in the Bronxville section, there's a section of forest that has a lot of tulip trees and some other native species, and it's a kind of specific type of forest ecosystem that obviously benefits the river itself. And so I thought that was very cool. It's a lot that could be learned from this section, and I had a good time reading it. The plan or the document breaks up the river into a couple different sections, and so we have like the main stem section. There's the sewer shed section down in the South Bronx, and then it talks about the different tributaries across Westchester that contribute to often it's pollution that these tributaries are contributing to the main stem of the river, but it breaks all these down into a lot of fine details. So there's a lot to be learned from here, and I think it does set the context for the rest of the document. So I apologize. I hope this doesn't make you dizzy. I'm just going to scroll. We also get into how the land is used along the watershed. So what's residential, what's commercial, what's kind of open space and, left natural vegetation and pervious surfaces and whatnot. This is really important because this informs us of things like stormwater, which is a huge issue that all urban rivers are facing, and the Bronx River is no exception. We also look at things like the environmental justice communities that live along the river. And that's really important for us in the context of climate change and, the quality of life, as I mentioned before, because different communities have different abilities to respond to crises and environmental issues as they're happening. And a lot of our communities along the river actually don't have a lot of ability to adapt or respond quickly. And that's where we're trying to focus a lot of our efforts. The document breaks down things like water quality. So this little image here, this is not quite accurate. I think this is an older version of the draft and was probably updated, but it shows our enterococcus samples. And so what percentage of our samples come back looking good, what percentage comes back looking terrible. These are not accurate pie charts, but most of our samples come back looking pretty gross. So that's obviously a problem on the Bronx River. And the plan looks at ways that we can address that by improving stormwater infrastructure, as well as expanding our green infrastructure installments and opportunities for more green infrastructure, which is great. The thing that I really want to draw your attention to, apologies for scrolling, is these risks here. And so the consultant, we sat down with them to talk about how we would approach assigning risks to these different communities. And so risks were things like your likelihood of experiencing a flood, or your likelihood of experiencing excessive heat during the summer, um, compounded by whether or not you're a low income household or not, and how all those things kind of come together um, to sort of paint this picture of what life is like along the Bronx River corridor. So we worked with the consultant to make sure that their analysis was kind of in line with what we thought would be the most beneficial and useful sort of breakdown for us when it comes to producing projects that could address these issues. And so these maps here are color coded to show where there are concentrated areas of risk along the Bronx River. Unsurprisingly, these maps are showing a lot of risk in the Bronx, but also in Mount Vernon and Yonkers, and in White Plains, right up in the top of the watershed. And so those are areas where we would like to really target and focus a lot of these restoration efforts and climate change resiliency efforts along the river. I won't dive too much into it. It would take hours for me to fully explain this document to you, but these are sort of some of the components that we were focusing on as we went through this process. And the result that we're hoping will be really fully fleshed out by August. I'm so sorry, I'm scrolling again. Is okay, a little further down than I thought. These sort of recommendations for projects. And so the end of the document has a list of tables that are kind of broken up by region to sort of show where there could be opportunities for example, reductions in illicit discharges. And so what that means specifically is if people are illegally hooking up their sewers, sanitary sewer lines to a storm drain, and so their sewage is ending up going straight into the Bronx River, as a way of cutting their maintenance costs. That's actually quite common in urban areas with separated storm sewer systems. And so these tables down here are sort of gathering different projects, and that's been kind of our main focus in this sort of latter half of this process, is really like, okay, we have this document, we have this context, it's great, but how do we turn these things into actions? And if they can be shovel ready, like if these projects can be as ready to go as they can be now, even better, because that helps us to find funding to put boots on the ground as quickly as possible. So this is where we've been reaching out. We formed the Watershed Advisory Committee, and so that kind of pulled together mayors and town representatives and other officials from all across Westchester County and municipalities that touch the Bronx River. And that group has met a number of times to discuss the issues as well as to discuss these opportunities for restoration. And so we've really looked to this Watershed Advisory Committee a lot to source a lot of these opportunities for these projects. And we got more from some locations and less from other locations. And I know that it's been a pretty busy time for the county these last couple of years. So, excuse me, getting folks to buy into this process was not as easy this time around as it was back in 2010. But we have gotten some great feedback. And these are not the most recent drafts of these tables, but they're more full now, I'm happy to say. And I think, Becca, you did contribute some suggestions to these tables as well. We've heard from some other folks. So it's very exciting to see new projects beginning to appear. I think that's probably one of the most valuable portions of this document, is these sort of recommended projects that will take us through hopefully the next 10 years of restoration work along the Bronx River. And so, right, the synthesis of the environmental justice consideration, the climate change consideration, the current issues with sewage and waste and invasive species all kind of combining and coming together, and that nexus is these proposed strategies for bringing this river to a place that it has not been in for a very long time. So I think it's very exciting. I'm very thankful for all the support that we've had with producing this document. I think our consultants have done a good job. They've been very flexible with us. They've taken our feedback very carefully and into consideration. And yeah, we're about maybe a month or so away from releasing this publicly. So I'm very excited about that, and happy to share this with anyone who wants to provide feedback tonight, if you can. That really will be our deadline for public feedback on this project. But otherwise, thank you to all of you who have contributed, and I can't wait to share the final project with you in the fall. Any questions or comments on the watershed plan?
And I put the link to our feedback form because it highlights some of the page numbers, but you
Yeah.
can also download the draft form from that link. And yeah, just hope you find it interesting. And we've had a lot of municipal and individual resident and organizational input on this.
Thanks, Danny. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and show you something more interesting. Yeah, feel free to send me any emails if you have questions after this meeting. Happy to answer them. And I've lost my slides, and I found my slides. Okay, so ecological updates from the river. So this is a look at some of the monitoring that we've done and the observations that we've been doing from the spring into the early summer. So first thing, very exciting that we were able to do another alewife restocking this year. It had been a number of years since we were able to do this for different reasons, mostly because we couldn't find fish in previous years to actually source and do the stocking with. And this year we had fish. So we were able to successfully bring 255 alewife into the Bronx River. I think they had come from a river in Connecticut. I don't quite
Correct.
remember. Yes. Great.
From Bridesbrook. This is where we've historically got them. It's one of the largest river herring runs in Connecticut, being the second, I think, behind what is called Herring Brook for good reason.
Yeah, I'm very jealous of Connecticut and their fish runs. I'm hoping that one day, I hope that I live to see New York regain those fish runs. Every little bit counts. This is one of those steps. So for those of you who are not as familiar with alewife ecology, they're a type of diadromous fish, meaning that they spend their lives between freshwater and saltwater. They're specifically anadromous, and so that means that they live their lives in the ocean, but they come into freshwater specifically to lay their eggs, which is the opposite from like a fish like the American eel, which spends most of its life in freshwater but goes into the ocean to lay its egg. Why we think this fish is really important is that historically, the population of alewife on rivers like the Bronx River were massive. River herring were so numerous that historically they were said to turn the river silver during their annual migrations because there was just so many of them that the water was like glistening with their scales, basically. We don't have that anymore. But what we're hoping is that as we bring these fish, which are basically ready to spawn at this time of year, into the Bronx River, they will lay their eggs here. The adults will move back out to the ocean, and then the babies, as they hatch and become familiar with the chemical smells and signatures of the Bronx River, will remember this space. And as they leave and become adults and come back to spawn, they will come back to the Bronx River and kickstart this population that will, make sure that this ecological role is being filled. Because it wasn't for hundreds of years when we started to build dams that cut off access to the river. We are seeing that numbers are kind of fluctuating each year, and that can be because of climate change, could also be because of poorly regulated fishing practices out in the Atlantic Ocean. And Becca, if you want to say anything more about that, I know that you understand some of those things more in more detail than I do. But
Sure. One of the ways, and this is also nice for me as a party who often can't participate in advocacy directly, I have to work with nonprofit partners for that. But we were able to publicly comment on a new regulation or amendment to fishing that NOAA and the National Marine Fisheries had, and specifically the New England Fisheries Management Council that basically governs how commercial fisheries can operate in the New England area. And New England for us instead of Mid-Atlantic, because the fish that come into the Bronx River come in via the Long Island Sound, and they basically stage right off of Rhode Island and Connecticut, waiting for the water to warm up to come into the freshwater streams in order to spawn. And so this time and time again, however, has been happening as their, particularly as their runs change and happen a little bit earlier. There are restrictions, there's supposed to be restrictions on trawling. So when commercial fisheries are fishing and they drop nets, they are restricted on doing that at certain times and can't just keep whatever they have. So most of the issues that we have with river herring are bycatch. And so they're basically, for lack of a better term, end up being lost as collateral damage to a commercial fishery for something that's not even, viable, which is really heartbreaking and very tragic for all of so many people, government, non-government, et cetera, trying to restore fish passage and reconnect these streams and increase, healthy fish populations. And so there was a comment period to amend that. And there was one in 2018, I believe, and then another recently. But basically, at the start of COVID, which coincided with the start of their runs in 2020, NOAA effectively defunded the program that really monitored and kind of served as a watchdog to those fisheries, and it has not restarted. So that was another thing that was commented on in the amendment. So there's kind of two things, is like there's not the patrol oversight that NOAA had previously combined, plus there is not a moratorium on trawling at that time of the year. So those are two of the things that we're really trying to get done. But I believe Save the Sound provided comment on that. I know we did. I'm not sure if the Alliance was able to, or if WCS in the end was able to, but we got some good local partners who were able to provide feedback. So that's one critical piece of advocacy that I think we can all be involved in.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation, and thank you for contributing to that advocacy specifically. And we didn't actually give comments as the Bronx River Alliance, but we did read yours, and I'm not sure if WCS had done, but I'm hoping they did. We can check with maybe John Calbelli. But yeah, we know that alewife are returning to the river. So this leads me to the fish passage numbers. They're not returning in huge numbers, but they are coming back upriver from the ocean. So I get weekly emails from, now it's Ava Schneiderman. I forget who it used to be.
Kristen Hudgens is still managing the program. She's going out on maternity leave next Monday.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, she'll be out for 6 months. I told her she timed it perfectly because she got the passage closed last week, and then she'll come back right in time to reopen it and for stocking. But yeah, Eva Schneiderman has been the point for coordinating monitoring. If anybody ever wants to go out, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So we just closed the fish passage, but we get these weekly updates. I don't know the full number of fish because that wasn't the count that was included in the update, but 11 alewife were documented swimming up the passage. I don't remember how that compares to previous years. I think it's lower than, say, 2019.
It's poor. Yeah, 2018 was our highest year, I think, at 80. And that was when, after that, the moratorium was lifted, and we have not had great years following that. But we have had a really great year for eel. Eel have actually been in high numbers everywhere. I think 2018 was also our highest number for eel. We had 450. And this year, almost 1,600. And then a couple of tributaries in Staten Island have had over 15,000.
Yeah,
So
I just heard that
hugely high numbers.
Yeah, Clay Pit Ponds Reserve, I think, in Staten Island was getting eels, and they had not documented them before.
Wild.
Kind of interesting, yeah. I don't know if it's good habitat for them, but they are coming up those creeks, so it's interesting. Good to know that eel are in good numbers. They were previously considered endangered. I don't know what their status is right now, but we're seeing. I saw an eel earlier this year swimming along the canoe that I was in, just randomly. So it's good to know that they're doing well. It's troubling to know the alewife are not doing well, but data like this that we're collecting from the fish passage helps us in our advocacy for trying to get that regulation reinstated and give it more teeth. So it's good work that we're doing. It's also good to see that the fish passage, as you know, well built and useful as it is, would not be as good as dam removal, which is something that the Bronx River Alliance does believe in quite strongly. And we believe that removing our dams on the Bronx River will do a lot to improve the health of the Bronx River. And seeing numbers like this could be a piece of that advocacy as well. So excited to see what we're looking at next year with fish passage. Hoping that these numbers will increase. But yeah, this is what we have so far. Always interesting to see that other fish are using the fish passage more than the alewives, like sunfish and carp, which don't really need to move around the river that much, but they seem to move around a lot. Although they're not very picky when it comes to their habitat. So it's interesting what happens under our noses in the river. Any questions about the fish passage? That brings me to another observation that we've made, which is that Atlantic menhaden are not being seen in the same quantities that they used to be, at least over the last couple of years. In 2020 to 2022, we were seeing gigantic swarms in the estuary right outside of our office here in Starlight Park. There was a couple of days in June where the fish were literally wall to wall. From one bank of the river to the other was just solidly fish. Swirling around in the sun. They were shiny. They were, you know, you could see people walking through the park and it was catching their attention. And they're like, oh my God, there's fish in the river. And we're not seeing that. We have not really seen a lot of adult fish. Haven't seen any in 2024. We saw a couple in 2023. And we saw some large young of year schools in 2023, but not so far this year. I've been doing a little digging and I have not seen any other water bodies reporting any changes in the Atlantic menhaden population. So I'm not sure if it's something that people are not really paying attention to, or if it's something more specifically with the Bronx River or the East River. But it's a little bit of a concern to me. I know that menhaden are considered one of the most important fish in this part of the ocean. They feed the dolphins, they feed the humpback whales that come through this area. They feed a lot of our water-loving birds, like our osprey and our wading birds. And so to not have them in the river rings a little bit of an alarm bell for me. Becca, I don't know if you know anything more about what's happening with menhaden, but I just wanted to flag that for the Eco Team.
I have not heard anything.
Yeah. We had like the picture.
Good or bad, I should say. Like no sightings even. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say in 2022, there was a large fish kill of menhaden in the fall. And I don't remember who was doing the necropsies, but they found that it was Vibrio that was killing off a lot of those fish. Don't know if that has anything to do with these losses now, but
yeah, those were DEC.
Yeah, the Vibrio is natural. It's a marine bacteria. It lives in the environment. I don't think it's unusual for alewife or for menhaden, I should say, to contract that disease, but I think there are things that we have done to the environment that can exacerbate poor health or the fish's likelihood of catching that disease. So I think that humans are probably still somehow to blame for this. Haven't quite figured it out, but yeah, I missed the menhaden. I'm sorry that they're not here. So we'll see what happens there. Okay. Kira, I think I'll pass this to you to quickly talk about what we've been up to with Enterococcus testing.
Hello. Yes, this is our biweekly water quality monitoring. It occurs from May to October on Thursday mornings and largely volunteer contributed to. They collect samples along the, sorry, I'm moving my phone around so I can see the graph a little better. They collect water samples along the Bronx River at 9 of our 11 sites. The other 2, Chris and I handle just because they're a little difficult to access. And we are testing the water for a fecal indicator bacteria, Enterococcus. And we do a procedure that is certified. It's by IDEX, and it allows us to obtain a most probable number of bacterial cells in that 100 milliliter sample of water that we've obtained. And so this chart right here is showing the May and June averages for each site along the river. So there are 11 sites along the river, and it goes from north on the river at Yonkers, McLean, Wakefield, to the bottom south of the river, the mouth of the river, and in Soundview. And so you can see that mostly the June averages have been far higher than the May averages, and that coincides with the higher temperatures of the summer season. Ironically, the recreational season, where people are most likely to be in contact with water, has the worst water quality. I don't know if that's actually ironic, but so that's very clear throughout all of our sites. The other contributing factor to the amount of Enterococcus in the water is rainfall as well. And that will lead me into our next slide. Sorry. So I have here just 2 of our, like a sample of our data from one day or 2 different days of water quality monitoring, June 13th and June 27th. So these are the brackish sites. So these are the southernmost sites in the river where brackish water is present, whereas like the northernmost sites are just fresh water. So brackish water, again, is like salt and fresh water mixed together. And the key difference between these sampling dates was that there was a lot of rainfall before the sampling date of the 27th, and there was almost no rainfall before the sampling date of the 13th. You can see the yellow line, that's the average rainfall at the site. Sorry, it's not labeled on the 13th one, but where it disappears is essentially where it goes to 0. So there was 0 rainfall recorded, average rainfall recorded from 0 to 48 hours prior to sampling for the 13th, whereas for the 27th, it was between 0.1 and 0.15 inches of rainfall, which is like significant enough. It takes 0.1 inches of rainfall to trigger a CSO overflow and discharge into the environment. But you can see there's pretty significant differences in the amount of Enterococcus. If you look at the left-hand vertical axis of the June 13th, you see that the highest number there is 250. So all those numbers are under 250 cells of Enterococcus per 100 mils of water, which is a lot lower. And then if you look at the axis for the June 27th graph, you can see it's over 20,000. So we pretty much maxed out our capacity to even determine how much Enterococcus is in the water. And then we'll just draw your attention quickly to this red line as well. That is the EPA threshold for safe contact, recreational contact with the water, and that's 35 Enterococcus cells per 100 milliliters of water. And you can see on the June 13th sampling date, there's even a site that's below that threshold, which is pretty good for us. And then you can see on the other graph that you can't even see the EPA threshold because the numbers are so high, and it just throws it completely off the graph. Just so you have a bit of an idea of what we're working with in our Bronx River sites and how rainfall can impact our data. And then the final slide that I'll talk about is just our targeted outfall monitoring, where Chris and I are testing specific outfalls along the Bronx River, and especially if they're wet outfalls in dry weather, which is a big concern. These were 2 that we sampled last week around around Oak Street in Yonkers, Mount Vernon area. We get in our hip waders and we walk around in the river. I wish I had actually put those pictures in this slideshow. There are some great pictures. It's a beautiful area, but we located 2 different pipes that we tested directly from. This one on the left-hand side, this bar on the left-hand side, is from a pipe that was actually foaming during dry weather, along with discharging. And so we had not great hopes for that one. And then the other outfall on the right-hand side was a little bit south on the river, which still had high enterococcus levels, but not as high as the outfall that was foaming. So in the future, we are going to be doing this season, going to be doing more targeted outfall monitoring, measuring and just looking at what's coming out of these outfalls and seeing if they are extremely contaminated or not. But excited to share more data with you. And I know it doesn't look great because it's got a lot of enterococcus in it, but it's always great to monitor and understand better what's in the water.
Thank you, Kira. Just want to clarify that the EPA's threshold is specifically for primary contact. That number is that indicates whether or not you could swim in the river safely. The threshold for being in a canoe or kayak, for example, is much higher than 35. Still, it's below 20,000. So when we have data like this, it really shows us that there are times when it is not safe to be on the water, and that is why we cancel so many of our recreational activities. And we've been doing it a lot more in recent years than we did before, because these numbers are higher for longer, unfortunately. Any questions about any of this data? I will say that we have a new rapport with DEC Region 3 and DEC Region 2. They have received these data over the last couple of years and have taken an interest in it. And so we actually did meet with some of those folks earlier in the season and did a site visit with them. And so they're going to be staying in the loop. They want to see more about, these problematic outfalls that are coming from Westchester County, and see how they can support us in getting those things addressed by the municipalities. So we're thankful for their support. We're also working with Yonkers and some of the other municipalities in partnership with the Nature Conservancy and the Federated Conservationists of Westchester County. I don't have a slide to talk about that, but it's a project that is bringing those municipalities resources to actually pay for their repairs themselves from all of the federal dollars that are currently available for infrastructure repairs. We've heard that municipalities are having a very hard time accessing those funds. And so we decided to basically teach them how to do that with the hopes that someone will submit a proposal, hopefully by the end of the year, or if not, maybe next year, but that'll get the ball rolling to start making these repairs and improve the water quality. We'll see where that goes, but I have high hopes for that. Yeah, and regarding the target outfalls, we will continue to go up and down the river. These were 2 outfalls that we had not really looked at closely before. So this data was kind of a surprise to me to see these numbers being so high. So we'll see. There's a lot of outfalls that spill during dry weather, and that's never a good sign. Okay, we're going to move quickly through these next few slides because time is against us. Learned recently from our friends at the Billion Oyster Project that the Soundview Park Oyster Reef is actually being expanded. It was never quite built to its intended size because the pandemic put a lot of restrictions on. I'm not really sure why the pandemic kind of impacted this work, but they never were able to put in all of the materials that they had intended. Quite a lot, actually. So they only managed to put in 180 of the oyster cages, but they were permitted for 250. And then they were not able to build one of the shell mounds. So you can see this picture on the right here. This is at a king tide. This is like one of the lowest water levels of the year, where it's the easiest to walk out and actually work on the oyster reef. So these big mounds here are shells. They're a mix of kind of shells that come from restaurants that are used to create the reef and provide a structure for the oyster larvae to attach to, as well as there are living oysters in there as well. And then these cages here, these gabions as they're called, actually contain live oysters. The Billion Oyster Project has found that these gabions are actually deteriorating much faster than they thought. They haven't even really lasted more than 4 years, and a lot of them have collapsed. And so they're replacing them with the concrete reef balls. These are actually being used more and more in other locations of oyster restoration. I think they actually have concrete reef balls somewhere in Queens for an oyster reef up
They're
there.
in Gansevoort,
There they are. Yep.
in Hudson River. And I'll add to just one correction. They're not putting any more gabions
Oh.
in the mound. All of what they put in most recently was the additional gabions that they were permitted. They put in reef balls in their place, and that's because of the issues. The gabions they didn't construct the entire permitted project to begin with because of supply chain issues with steel in particular during COVID. And then on top of it, I don't think they think that the deterioration was directly related to supply chain issues either. I think it's just the salt water, as you know, is going to eat anything. But they were in better shape up at the Tappan Zee where it's not as salty, and so they were hopeful.
Ah.
But yeah, so they have removed all of the gabions. They have placed additional reef balls, and then next year they're going to replace all of the well, I guess the gabions are already out. They're going to put reef balls in their place. So it'll be interesting to watch this winter because the shell mounds are actually a little bit vulnerable to wave and stuff like that.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, I've seen some really sweet video of dives too. There's lots of baby and big oysters. Well, it's doing, I think, much better in some ways than anticipated, despite the lack of, I don't even know whether or not you'd call it success, lack of structural integrity of the gabions. But yeah, there's more at Gansevoort in Hudson River Park that are both gabions and reef balls. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, they're very cool. Thank you for that. For folks who are not very familiar with this reef, this is the largest restored oyster reef in the city. So we're very proud of that. We take a lot of pride in having that. And there are opportunities for volunteers to actually support some of this monitoring. So I have a contact, Allison Fitzgerald, who works at New Jersey City University and used to work with New Jersey Baykeeper. She's always looking for volunteers. She provides all the materials. You just need to show up. It's usually pretty early in the morning, but it is a lot of fun. And somewhere there are pictures of me and some of our local elected officials in the Bronx actually getting down and dirty with the oysters. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you to Allison. And we'll see if he can get you in some waders and get you to play with some oysters. Oysters are we're considering them very important for the restoration of this ecosystem because of the incredible work they do to filter water and provide habitat for other species to survive. So we wish this reef much success as well as all the reefs around New York City. Any questions? Or I'll keep it pushing. All right, we have, in addition to the things we've discussed before, some new issues and concerns that have popped up recently. We'll discuss the Cross Bronx 5 Bridges proposal first. For those of you who are not familiar, the Cross Bronx cuts right across the Bronx. It is a major artery for I-95, and it's old and it's falling apart. And a lot of the bridges that are supporting the highway are actually in dire need of replacement. And there's no discussion to be had there. They're structurally not very sound. And so the State Department of Transportation needs to fix those structures. And their proposal currently, at least most of what they're saying to us, is that they want to build a bypass road that they're calling the Multimodal Community Connector Roadway to redirect traffic as they take down the bridges and rebuild them. This will take, they say, about 5 years and at a cost of $900 million, more or less. And so we already have some concerns there. because that's a lot of years of construction. It's going to lead to a lot of traffic jams in an area of the Bronx that is already dealing with really, really high levels of air pollution. And so we're already just really concerned about what's happening here. But in particular, we don't really love the idea behind the multimodal community connector being a fixed sort of permanent structure in this landscape.
We're talking with organizations and community members about it.
Yeah.
It's like it's been presented as the way to go, and it's also been presented as what the community wants through the Reimagine the Cross Bronx conversations. However, you know, there's a very big project with a big scope. It's almost like building the existing Cross Bronx over just south of it. So we're in lots of conversations around what this should be, while you know there is community desire to have east-west bike and pedestrian connections. Just because this is an easy solution doesn't mean it's the one that will best serve these communities of the Bronx or the Bronx as a whole.
Right. And part of, at least one of my concerns, is that as DOT has done these presentations with different organizations, some of the information they presented has changed slightly in different spaces, and that is a bit of a red flag for me. So we'll see what happens. There could be another option that does not involve building this multimodal roadway. And we'll see what actually gets chosen. But it's good that we've been able to get as much community engagement as we have, considering that once this project gets started, it's going to be here to stay. And I just want to show you the next slide, which was the last time that DOT was doing work on the Cross Bronx over the Bronx River. They dumped a bunch of debris into the water, and then they lied about it, and they said they were permitted to do this, and they weren't, and there was this whole big back and forth, which did result in them getting a fine and then having to clean up the river. But it was frustrating to have to deal with that situation, and it eroded a lot of our trust in this agency because of what they had done to the river and how they had communicated with us. So it wasn't a great foundation for us, and now we're, working with them once again for another construction project right next to where this happened. So we're keeping an eye on this. We've been as communicative as we can with our local community just to make sure they're aware of what's happening and providing them with as many opportunities as they can to make their voices heard. So just wanted to raise that to your awareness. And if there's another opportunity for folks to get involved, we will let you know as soon as we can. Any questions about the Cross Bronx? Okay. So this is something that we just learned about fairly recently, actually pertaining to the river itself. The Army Corps of Engineers is proposing a really large dredging project along the estuary between roughly the location of the Bruckner Expressway down to the mouth of the river. Since the pandemic, the facility next to Hunts Point Riverside Park has begun to export, or maybe not export, but move around aggregates. So things like gravel and stone and sand and stuff, which is useful in construction. They found that to be quite a lucrative business. And so in addition to moving recycling and landfill materials, they're now moving a lot of these barges of rocks and dirt, basically. Unfortunately, because of how much sedimentation has built up in the estuary, the boats can only use this channel at high tide, otherwise they would get stuck. And so in order to ease access into the estuary by these boats, there's this proposal to actually deepen the channel of the river and move 200,000 cubic feet of sediment out of the estuary. Previously, back in 1997, 60,000 cubic feet were dredged, and so this is quite a large increase in dredge materials. So some of our concerns are that in this proposal, there isn't a clear mention of an assessment on the environmental impact to the river. They talked a lot about the dump site where the sediment actually gets deposited out in the Atlantic Ocean, and their analysis of that, but they didn't talk about their analysis of the river or its ecosystem here. So that's a red flag for me. Any work being done here, especially with dredging materials, we have some ecological communities that can be sensitive to that. The oyster reef is one. Although this dredging project is not going to go very close to the Soundview oyster reef, I would have liked to see that mentioned, that at least they were aware that it existed and that they understood what the buffer zone between the dredging and that reef needs to be in order to keep the oysters safe and healthy. And there was also not mention of what impact increasing boat traffic would have on the river itself. Since this is what this project is being catered for, is to allow these ships to move up and down more easily. One can only assume that once they've dredged, we'll be having these large tugboats coming up and down all the time. And I would like to know what potential impacts that might have on the river. Interestingly enough, some of our community actually thinks that there could be some benefits to this because these tugboats are already kicking up lots of sediment, which is burying the riverbanks, especially around Hunts Point Riverside Park. And our friends at Rocking the Boat have seen a decrease in some of our bird species that they think could be connected to the increased sediment. And so potentially having a deeper channel might reduce the amount of sediment that's being deposited in the park and on the banks. We're not really sure. We would love to know more about that. And if Army Corps or if our friends at Riverkeeper might know more about these things, we've reached out to see if they can provide us with some answers. But right now we're waiting to see what happens with this. And we have a comment letter that we're hoping to send very soon and hope that they will give us some answers soon. If and when I hear back, I will report that to the Eco Team. Any questions about this? These tugboats do interfere with our recreational activities. They pose a slight risk to our estuary paddles. And I've been on a couple paddles where we have to actually get all the canoes out of the way of the tugboat. They don't slow down very easily, and they just kind of charge up and down the river. So we have to be very vigilant if we're doing paddles at high tide. So, any questions or comments? Okay. I forgot I left this slide in here. Yeah, we are doing an air quality monitoring program. It allows folks to access hyperlocal air quality 24/7, especially in recent years with the smoke events that we've had and the frequent summer smog events where the air quality spikes and there's a lot of air pollution. This information becomes very valuable. And so if this is something that's interesting to you or if you think might be interesting to somebody that you know, please feel free to scan the QR code or send it to someone else and see if you can sign up for this air quality data. This program has been running for 3 years now, I think, at this point. And we've seen some pretty interesting patterns in air pollution, which is kind of cool. Now that we've expanded the sensors that we're using along the entire length of the river from the North Bronx to the South Bronx, some cool things have popped up. Particularly as it pertains to how close the air quality sensors are to a park or green space versus like an elevated subway line on White Plains Road, as you can imagine. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to scan the QR code or reach out to me for more information. Other opportunities to get involved with us, of course, as we mentioned before, our water quality monitoring program, which is known as Project Water Drop. This is how we get our enterococcus data. As Kira mentioned before, aside from our 2 sample sites in Muskrat Cove Park, the rest of this data is driven by our volunteers. I know that David had some experience with this program as well in the past. I think it's pretty cool to be able to do community science like this, and our volunteers this year are really, really gung-ho. We've got a really great, solid group of volunteers that are very dedicated, and we're very thankful for their support. If this sounds interesting to you or someone you might know, please feel free to share this. The program runs until October, and it takes place on Thursday mornings every other week. And it allows us to get water quality information ahead of the weekend where folks might be planning recreational visits to the Bronx River. we submit this data along with other waterfront organizations across the city. So it gets kind of added to a database of water quality that informs folks whether or not they should go swimming or fishing. They should never go swimming, really. But if they're going to be in close contact with the water, it helps them make a more informed decision. So, some of the things. Oh, this is an old slide. This should not have been included here, I don't think. I'll skip that for now. Here's some advocacy opportunities. As I mentioned before, we're doing a lot of work in Westchester County to improve water quality on the Bronx River, as well as some of the other rivers in Lower Westchester. We were part of an ad hoc working group of other NGOs looking at a sewer consolidation proposal for Westchester County, which ideally in the long run would lower the cost of sewer repairs and make repairs easier to accomplish, as well as other options and opportunities for improving the water quality. This has been formally recognized now as a coalition known as the Westchester Coalition for Clean Water. And this was us receiving a plaque a couple weeks ago. So the Bronx River Alliance is formally a coalition member, and we're excited to be working with other folks, including Riverkeeper and Groundworks Hudson Valley, to advance, policies and solutions to, get more clean water in the Bronx River, in the Hutchinson River, Tibbetts Brook, the Sawmill, the Hudson. There's so many different waterfronts across Westchester County, and they're all suffering from pollution. And so we're trying to see what we can do to change that and provide these communities with better access to healthy water and recreational activities. So that's exciting, and I'm happy to talk offline if you'd like to learn more about these efforts. This I discussed at the last meeting. We are still interested in trying to develop some kind of restoration plan for the Bronx River. We kicked off this conversation by talking about trash, but this can be expanded to include the other issues that are impairing the river, including fecal bacteria. And we're working closely with our friends in the Urban Water Spurwell Partnership and the EPA to see how we can get one of these plans designed for the Bronx River. We don't have one, and having an actual document like one of these plans would open up access to funding, more regulatory support, and an easier way to stem the flow of pollution that's entering the Bronx River. So we're not quite where we thought we would be. I think earlier in the year we had thought that this would be an easier process, and it's harder than we thought, so it's taking a little longer. But it is still a goal of mine to get one of these plans developed at some point in the future to protect the river. So all I can say now is watch this space. I hope to have a good update for you soon. I'm actually happy to report not something good, but that somebody on the river actually reported an issue. They called us to say that while they were paddling in the estuary, they saw the Sims recycling plant dumping a bunch of material into the river. The barges that are stationed near Hunts Point Riverside Park are supposed to have nets that catch that material to keep it from getting into the water, but the net was broken. And this person documented a bunch of things falling into water that should not have been falling into the water, and then called us to let us know, as well as calling 311. And so this is not great to hear, but great to know that we have eyes and ears on the river, and that when things are going wrong, someone is taking note and letting us know. And so I encourage all of you to do the same thing, and encourage other folks who might be jogging or kayaking or hanging out in the park with their dog along the Bronx River to keep their eyes out. And if they see something that doesn't look right, please follow these steps to report the problems. This page is right on our homepage on the website at www.bronxriver.org, called Report a Problem. And we highly encourage folks when they see something to say something. It really helps us to increase our capacity to address problems as they occur. Any questions about that? Okay. I see a hand raised. Bill?
Does that include the ongoing leak of effluent from Westchester County into the river that we've known about for ages and constantly shows up in the water test?
I would say yes. So you might have missed an earlier part of the meeting. We were talking about targeting specific outfalls in Westchester County. We're kind of still just getting started with that process, and so there's probably locations that we haven't seen where there could be outfalls that are spilling effluent that have not been documented. So yes, if you are out along the river somewhere in Westchester County and you see a pipe that is spilling effluent, there is a chance that we don't know about it or have not mapped it. And so it would definitely be useful information for us to have as we're going forward with that project. Because we want as much information as possible to be able to report to the municipalities and to the DEC. Good question. I think this might be one of my last slides, and we are drawing close to the end of the meeting. Thank you all for sticking along. I want to shout out Nikki, who's on the call taking notes for us this meeting. Very thankful for her support. We're always looking for support with the Bronx River Eco Team. And some of the ways that we're looking for support is for facilitation or note taking. But also if you're interested in sourcing environmental campaigns or calls to action that we might want to be involved in, that would be pretty cool as well. I'm always trying to keep my eyes out for things that I can bring to the team, but if you happen to come across something that you think might align with our interests, I encourage you to please, send those my way. And if you have an idea for how we can be more involved in person, that would be great as well. It's been a little while since the Eco Team met for an in-person event. We had done a series of nature walks back in 2021, I think, or maybe 2022. But it's been a while, and I would love to be able to interact with folks and hang out in person along the river. So if there are ideas that you have or suggestions, please don't be shy. I would love to know what those are and see if we can get some dates on the calendar for us to actually hang out. We did do a movie viewing with Riverkeeper last year, which was a lot of fun. And so I would love to do more of that as well. So any ideas or suggestions, I'm definitely all ears. Please don't be shy. Let me know what you're thinking. So we only have about 5 minutes left, but number one, thank you all for sticking with us. And if you have any other suggestions or collaborations that we might be able to do, or if you're interested in supporting the Eco Team in different ways, please feel free to come off mute and let us know. If not, then I will say goodnight to you all and see you next time.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, Marty. Appreciate your support always.
I never come away from these meetings without having learned something. I appreciate it a lot.
I try my best.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you
Take
all.
care, everyone. Bye.
Talk to you soon.